Once you've run your usability study and maybe even your heuristic evaluation, you have all this data, so what do you do with that? What's the best way to present that information? Something to keep in mind that I want to make sure to say is that there's really no one good way to present your findings. There's also not like a best practice for this in the field of usability. Also thinking about just keeping track of findings over time. Like you run a usability study and you might learn 50 things but only want to share 5 because those are the impactful ones. What do you do with those 50 findings? And so there's lots of Excel spreadsheets, lots of PowerPoint, lots of Word documents, and none of those are the best. And so my caveat is that we don't have a great way to do this, and I'm going to share the things that I think work really well and the best ways to do them. But this is a place where we can innovate. And so especially if any of you taking this class have ideas on a better way to present findings, I'd love to hear them, but we also as an industry need to change how we report on our usability findings. If you run a quantitative usability study, so a larger sample size, and you're doing that to draw conclusions about all your users, so not just what participants did in the study, it's also usually more around numbers. Graphs can be great, and graphs are really nice to convince other people of stuff, especially if you're X points better than your competitors. There's nothing better that shows that than a graph that shows how much faster people can accomplish a task on your site, how much happier they were about it, how much more successful, or even between tasks, which ones are easy to complete, which ones aren't, where the more errors occurred. So in a quantitative study, you have the benefit of being able to show graphs and numbers and show them in percentages. So quantitative data is actually not what I want to spend a lot of time talking about. The qualitative data is much harder to present in a way that's easily digestible, because you end up with lots of quotes, transcripts from sessions, and videos. And so there's not like one way to do that, and actually presenting qualitative data in graphs can have a really bad effect, because you can't actually extrapolate 3 out of 6 participants and say 50% of users because it was only 3 out of 6 participants. Even if you show a graph where it's only 3 out of 6 participants, it might drive a senior executive at a company to make this huge sweeping change that isn't really what you had intended or hoped to do. So it can be a little misleading to use graphs for qualitative data. One of the benefits I see to qualitative data is that you get to show video clips. And so this is also an encouragement to record your video sessions, whether or not they were remote or in person, because there's nothing better than being able to show someone what happened rather than having to describe it. And so you might be in a meeting where you're trying to convince someone of the benefit of having done a round of usability testing, or maybe it was several rounds of usability testing that you did and you made changes in between. You want to show how that experience was improved for your users. In a boardroom where people see graph after graph and PowerPoint presentation after PowerPoint presentation with lots of text, a video can be such an amazing change for them, and also just immediately get the empathy that you want from them, where they're willing to drive change, because it doesn't matter that only 3 out of 6 people had a problem if they see people struggle, and it's such a frustrating experience that even if it was just those 3 people, we should fix the problem for those 3 people. And so it doesn't matter that it was only 3 out of 6 and that we don't know how many people of all our users will have that problem. It's a big enough issue. And so I really like using video clips. At UserTesting, we do a lot to include video clips in our reports to give people a little bit of that sense of like, what is the experience like for the people who are using our product. So an example of using video clip rather than text or description is that I did an evaluation of the Stitch Fix website. So Stitch Fix sends you clothing. They're kind of a online personal stylist. So you tell them kind of what your style is and what you're looking for, your size, and then they ship you a box of clothes either every month, every other month, whatever frequency you want it at. And so in the usability study that we did on their website, we found that people had trouble using the sizing chart because they were looking for numeric numbers, size, clothing sizes, and then small, medium, large letter clothing sizes. And so I can describe that like I just did. I could show you just a screenshot of the sizing chart. Much more impactful is to just show you what happened. And even if I just show you one example that's sort of representative of users interacting with the sizing chart. And actually in this case, all the participants had problems at some point in time trying to figure out what size to select. And so what I'm actually going to do is show you what a clip is that I would show in a meeting where I want to drive the change and encourage people to improve this sizing chart.
See, I'm not really sure what number size is so subjective, so I'm going to leave it as, oh, good, a size chart is right there. Thank you very much. So here's the weight, here's the height, so it's small. I don't see a number size. Currently we are okay. Yes, but I don't see the 0 to 14 indicator on here that's telling me what a small would be. So.
My favorite example sharing videos is someone who worked at a company where they did testing actually every week. On Thursday they would do some kind of usability testing, and so on Friday he would send out clips from the sessions, and so he'd send out no more than 3 clips of things he wanted to make sure everyone at the company would see, and he would send this to the whole company. Probably more realistically is that you would send an email like that out maybe to a much smaller team, or actually include the videos in a PowerPoint presentation. So as much as I complained about PowerPoint at the beginning of this lesson, it is still a really powerful visual tool to present anything to a team. And so I really also like taking advantage of screenshots and taking notes on screenshots. And so that's a little easier. The problem with videos is that someone has to still sit still and watch what happens if they want to just kind of quickly remember what something was about. If the video is attached to a screenshot with maybe a small summary of the finding or what we learned from the participants, that's easily tied together in PowerPoint, which is how I usually present these results. Totally different approach to making sense of data and results that come from usability testing is to do something that's called affinity diagramming, and I've included a link in the course resources to really delve into what affinity diagramming is. But it's taking advantage of having multiple people watch the same sessions that you're watching. So if you have recorded videos, you might all sit down and watch the videos together. Or if you're doing in-person live usability testing, you invite observers to come. What you do is hand everyone out a stack of sticky notes, and they write down each observation on a separate sticky note, and then at the end of all the sessions you go around the room and place all the sticky notes on the walls, and you group the related observations together. And so you put the groups, everyone, the first round just silently kind of grouping observations, and then in following rounds you can refine them also while talking. What's really great about that is that the final round of affinity diagramming, you can give everyone stickers, and it's basically a vote. So I like to give people 3 votes, and they get to go around the room, and you might have ended up with 8 observations, things that you learned from the sessions. And everyone gets to vote only on the top 3 that they think are the most important. And what happens is that you actually end up with a top 3, maybe a top 5 that get the most votes. There's actually usually one big winner. And so not only do you have your top 5, you have it organized and ranked, and everyone in the room is bought in because they all had something to say. They all had something to say about what the insights were from the study, and then which ones are the ones that are most important to fix. To really decide what should and shouldn't be changed, something to keep in mind is how much designer and engineering resources are required to make a change. So something will require like a complete rebuild of something, that's going to be a lot of engineering resources. And you really need someone else at the company to help you decide what thing, like one thing that might make the biggest impact for users might be really, really expensive to the company and just not worth it at the time. So someone has to do that cost-benefit analysis. It could be a senior manager on the product team, engineering team, even higher up depending on your company. Something that affinity diagramming provides, if you can get the right people in the room, is that that kind of happens together, and everyone kind of decides together that these are the things that we must change, especially with our goal in mind to impact change, to get the design improved. You want to think about who your audience is. So if you're working, let's say you're actually the researcher and not the designer, or you're maybe the product manager doing some research, and you're presenting what you learned to designers. I personally really like showing annotated screenshots. So I'll take a screenshot of the different pages that the user went on, or the different screens they saw in an app, and I'll circle the things that either caused trouble or the things that worked really well and call it the specific design elements. For engineers, besides showing the screenshots, I really like using clips because it can be especially hard for engineers to think about how Users might be using it differently than they had intended. So they might have had an idea about how something would work or what the interaction would be if someone clicked on something, and that's not what the participants in the study experienced. And so just showing them that this is the experience users had will give them enough empathy to want to make the change. And so I will do screenshots and videos. For managers or executives, I like to have an executive summary that's really short and to the point. So maybe it's the top 3 things that worked really well. I like starting with things that worked well that you shouldn't change, and then the top 3 things that will make the biggest impact and change. In presenting your usability findings, the goal is to create the change. You have to indicate and show where the changes have to happen. So you have to indicate where there were usability problems or things that impacted the experience. That's not you being mean, that's you trying to be helpful. And so you have to kind of take a step away from feeling like this is just sharing all the negatives and all the things that are wrong. So start with the things that are really good. Like, what are the key things that are working great that shouldn't be changed, and then where are the areas for improvement? I also like to call it that. And so the most successful presentations I've seen kind of have that structure.